Hello, welcome to Dreaded, the channel of uncomfortable truth. Please subscribe. You know, sometimes history feels like a dusty old book on a shelf. Names, dates, battles. But when you sit with it, when you actually picture the people living inside those moments, it hits different. Because history isn't just the past. It's the echo of choices. And sometimes those choices were brutal. Take Guatemala, a small country in Central America. Beautiful, lush, full of volcanoes, rivers, farmland, and people who, for the most part, just wanted to live off the land, raise their families, and survive with dignity. But in the 1950s, the story took a dark turn. And let's not sugarcoat this. America had everything to do with it. So here's how it started. In 1950, Guatemalans elected a man named Jacobo Árbenz. Now, Árbenz wasn't some wild revolutionary trying to burn the system down. He was more like a hopeful reformer. He looked around and thought, why is it that a few rich families and foreign corporations own nearly all the land, while most of our people, peasants, and indigenous communities are starving on scraps? It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. And he believed democracy could fix it. So he came up with a plan. Land reform. If a big landowner had vast acres sitting idle land they weren't even using, then the government could buy it from them and give it to poor farmers. Not stolen. Bought. Paid at fair value. It was bold. But it was also common sense. If people could farm their own land, they could eat, they could sell, they could build a future. And for a brief moment, hope blossomed in Guatemala. Enter the Banana Empire. But here's where the story takes a nasty twist. Because Guatemala wasn't just Guatemala. It was also the playground of the FIU United Fruit Company, an American corporation that practically owned the country. And when I say owned, I mean it. They controlled ports, railroads, shipping, and the best land. They weren't farming all of it. Huge parts just sat there, unused, but they weren't about to let go either. Now, Árbenz's land reform, that meant United Fruit would have to give up some of that idle land, and oh, they hated that idea. But here's the kicker. United Fruit wasn't just powerful in Guatemala. They had friends in Washington, big friends. The U.S. Secretary of State, the CIA director. Both had ties to the company. Imagine that. The referees of the game owned shares in one of the players. So what did United Fruit do? They whispered in the right ears. They painted Árbenz as a dangerous communist. Never mind that he wasn't. Never mind that all he wanted was fair land distribution. In the middle of the Cold War, communist was the magic word. It could turn a hopeful farmer into a threat overnight. Operation PB Success. In 1954, the CIA launched something called Operation PB Success. Sounds harmless, right? Like a summer camp program. But no. This was the blueprint for destroying Guatemala's democracy. They trained and armed a rebel army. They ran psychological warfare, blasting propaganda through radio, newspapers, even dropping fake leaflets to make it look like a massive uprising was happening. But here's the ugly truth. There wasn't one. Ordinary Guatemalans weren't begging for Árbenz to fall. The CIA had to manufacture the illusion of chaos, and it worked. Under pressure, Árbenz resigned. He left the country humiliated, barefoot, stripped of dignity, and the U.S. installed a military regime that was friendly to American business. The cost of bananas, on paper, Washington cheered. The communist threat had been crushed. United Fruit was safe. But for Guatemalans, it was the beginning of a nightmare. The coup shattered Guatemala's fragile democracy. What followed were decades of dictatorships, civil war, secret police, massacres, and fear. From the 1960s through the 1990s, over 200,000 Guatemalans were killed or disappeared. Entire indigenous villages wiped out, generations scarred. All because one country dared to believe land should belong to the people who worked it. And all because the U.S. decided bananas and corporate profits were worth more than human lives. The uncomfortable truth. And here's the uncomfortable part. This wasn't just a Cold War story about fighting communism. That was the excuse. At its core, it was about money, power, control. Guatemala wasn't destroyed by some natural disaster. It was destroyed by choices. Choices made in boardrooms and government offices thousands of miles away. And here's what stings even more. Guatemala is still living with those consequences today. Poverty, corruption, violence. They didn't appear out of thin air. They're the shadows of 1954. Why it matters now. So why tell this story? Because history has a way of repeating itself. Different names, different countries, but the same pattern. A smaller nation tries to rise, tries to chart its own course, and a bigger power steps in, claiming to protect democracy, while really protecting its own interests. And if we don't face these truths, if we keep pretending these were necessary actions or Cold War strategy, then we stay blind to the ways power can still crush hope today. Guatemala's story isn't just about the past. It's a mirror, a reminder that justice, freedom, and dignity, they're fragile. And sometimes the biggest threat to them doesn't come from enemies, but from so-called friends. So next time you peel a banana or hear the word democracy used like a shield, remember Guatemala. Remember Árbenz. Remember that a dream of fairness was once traded for fruit. And that's how America destroyed Guatemala. Thanks for watching. For more, please subscribe.